Hey guys, it's Carolyn. Welcome back to the podcast. And I'm talking to another female powerhouse in the construction industry, Jessica Herrala. How are you today, Jessica?
I am awesome. Excited to be talking to another female powerhouse in the construction industry.
I know we're going to talk about all things AI and construction, which I have to admit, I'm a little behind the ball and don't know
Sure.
a whole lot. So I'm hoping you'll help me explain everything. But before we dive into that, kind of tell us your background, where you've been, and how you got to
Sure.
where you are now.
Sure. I'm a construction girl at heart. My family grew up in construction. So my dad was at Lend-Lease, RIP Lend-Lease. My dad was at Lend-Lease for his whole career. My uncle was at Skanska his whole career. So I came by this honest, as we say in the South. I spent 17 years at Skanska and then relocated to Chicago and ran strategy at Walsh for 3 years. I was at Clayco for a short time before I really had kind of a crisis of conscience of myself of not doing enough for women in the industry. So I went and did a hard right pivot and worked for a women's leadership development company for a couple of years because it was a real passion of mine. It was something important to me. I felt like I needed to do more to give back. But I really missed construction. And I didn't know, much like you, I wasn't really aware of this like wide world of construction technology. I knew there was Procore, I knew there was Primavera, but the very basics of construction technology. And I had no idea the world in which had been created for this industry and that was targeting this industry. So I was recruited into the construction technology space. And when I saw what was possible, when I saw what was out there, I was just blown away. I wanted in. And I've been in it ever since, which is, a little over 3 years now. I love every part of it. I love showing people what's possible with technology and like showing people that there's a way that we could actually make some money in this industry. What a concept.
Yeah, really. Not like that job. Help us out. So, at its core, what is AI? I know it stands for artificial intelligence, but what does that mean?
It's such a broad question, and it's kind of a funny question to ask because AI is something different to everybody, right? I mean, ultimately, AI is machine learning, right? And so the way I describe AI to people in construction, because that's who we're talking about today, right? And the most basic way to describe AI is imagine teaching a baby how to recognize mom or dad. Right. And what you're doing is teaching a computer to recognize different elements in a building, much like you teach a baby how to recognize mom or dad. And so you point to mom and you say mom, and you tell the baby mom 100 times. And then you point to mom and you go, who's that? And the baby's like, bottle. And you're like, no, let's start over again. And then you tell the baby 100 more times, that's mom. And finally the baby is like, I got it. And you never have to tell me that's mom again. We're doing the same thing in construction, right? We're teaching a machine, we're teaching AI to learn what goes into a building and what makes a construction project happen. Using materials, okay? And in some cases, AI is tracking people and the comings and goings of people. So it's a way to teach a machine how to do a very manual task that exists today, right? And if you think about ChatGPT and most basic AI that we all came to know early on, right, is like AI was you are doing something very manual, like, I used ChatGPT to write my in-laws' obituaries. Like, it's something very manual that you say to yourself, I don't really want to do this. So can I teach somebody else how to do it? And somebody else has gone through the effort of teaching ChatGPT and teaching a machine how to write something for you. And so you put it in there and it writes it for you. But in construction today, what AI is doing is tracking either materials or people, the comings and goings and working of people.
So how does that actually work? Do they tell me how that works? Because I don't even know where to start. What does that look like?
Yeah, so what you do is run thousands and thousands and thousands of images through a machine. And I'm speaking about, Buildots and what we do today. We run thousands of images from thousands of different projects all over the world. And construction, there are some, idiosyncrasies about different little things of, regions and how we call things different names. But largely construction is the same around the world. So what we're doing is running thousands of these images through the computer, through the machine. The machine is learning and picking up, like, this is drywall, this is a rough-in, this is mechanical rough-in, this is electrical rough-in, this is a top track, this is a bottom track, that's insulation. This is the difference in a color change, right? Like, this wall was white, now this wall is purple, that's a change. Now you're tracking paint. And so that's how it works, is it's teaching the machine.
And then how do you use that information to build a better business or to make your life easier in the industry?
Yeah, it's crazy to think, because people who are not inside the industry, and in fact, Jack Welch, Jack is like a personal friend of my family's. And I was explaining to him one time, like, how construction works and, the margins we work on. And he's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm like, yes, and yet we're all still doing it because we love it and we're like masochists. But so when you tell people outside of construction how construction is done today, they're like blown away, right? That, like, today, in order to track how a building goes up, there is a person that walks outside with a spreadsheet and says, oh yes, this drywall got installed in this room. Check. This sprinkler is here. Check. Maybe it's in the right place. Maybe it's not in the right place. And then they go back into a trailer and then they put it into a spreadsheet or a doc, or some sort of database somewhere, where then you go from all this human bias, right? Because you have the error of the person walking out there, right? Or you have somebody, a laborer telling a foreman, yes, I did this. And the foreman's like, okay, cool, he did it, not checking it. Right. And so then once you have that very human bias data, then what do you do with it? Right. And who's there crunching those numbers, and how does that work, and what's the accuracy of it? And so what AI is doing today, in the sense of what, I do and my passion about every day and why it saves people money, is it's literally the machine tracking that progress. And it's just one person walking around the job site once a week with a hard hat on their camera, a camera on their hard hat, and they should be walking the job site anyway. They don't have to stop. All they're doing is walking around. They can stop and talk to people, whatever it is. And then it measures it against the BIM model. Okay. And so it's planned versus actual is what we're doing, but it's the machine, the AI, then doing all that analysis. The AI is then saying, this is what was installed. This is the materials that were installed of whatever element it is. Hundreds of elements that go into a construction project, right? And the only way that we are truly able to do anything with data is when you have massive amounts of data that humans just cannot do themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And it runs at a 93% accuracy, which is, this is crazy, 50% more accurate than humans. So
that'd be a substantial amount more accurate than somebody guesstimating.
That's exactly right. So again, then what you do with the data is what matters. Who gives a shit if you have all this data and then there's nothing to do with it? So then you use the computer and the AI and Power BI and all of these things to then crunch numbers and start giving you forecasts, start showing you smoke before there's fire. Wow. And Carolyn, of all people, because of your background and your husband's background, like, all project managers and superintendents do all day long is put out fires. That's all they do. That's all they do. Absolutely. And it's all a matter of what the size of the flaming ball of crap that's coming through your window that day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So imagine if all of this data that the AI is collecting for you, right, also starts to show you where there's problems before the human eye can ever see those problems, ever.
That's amazing. So like it would start out with a picture of just like a blank piece of land. You would show it and then you progress, or how does that?
That's a good question. Currently today, you have to have something that you're staring at. It's not a blank piece of land, right? It's like once you have something to stand on and you're starting to like frame a building, frame a project out, that's when the AI really starts picking up, right? Mm-hmm. We're getting to a point where we're tracking structural steel, and it's easier to track when there's no 6 elevations, 4 walls, right? Mm-hmm. But the AI, and that's what's amazing to me about technology. Construction moves so slow, technology moves so fast.
Yes.
That it's like, ask and you shall receive is like what I talk to my customers about a lot. It's like, what we can't do today, we can do next week.
Mm-hmm.
And it moves that quickly, and it's so responsive that the construction industry is really starting to wake up to what the potential is for it.
So it's helping you develop accurate pay apps.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're dead on that, because what you're able to see is actual progress made week over week, right? And the data shows that. The data will say this trade partner completed X percentage of this particular element, right? So when the pay app comes in, I mean, think about how much time is spent verifying pay apps. Woo!
Yeah.
And then the time spent arguing about the pay app.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, with your background, like how many arguments come up with freaking pay apps. And so having the ability to check against that, and then sitting down, and if they're bitching about it and saying, no, I don't agree, you literally look at the picture and you're like, yeah, no, you didn't do it. And it's not walking out on the job site. It's not having to go back in time and argue about the facts. The history is right there in front of you, and it shuts down arguments pretty quickly, which then changes the whole dynamic of the construction site. And it really, once the trade partners know that there's that level of data out there, it changes the conversation.
I'm all about, especially in commercial construction, managing clear expectations, right?
Yes.
I think the contracts do a terrible job of doing that.
Terrible.
Because nobody can read them.
Right.
But if, we know what's expected, I'm guessing, so I have a couple particular questions, right? So will it pick up defects or things that are done incorrectly?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the magic of it. And it's funny because that's not our purpose. Mm-hmm. Our purpose is not to be a quality tool, but it just is a byproduct, right? Because you're doing planned versus actual, it's going to tell you if something's missing or in the wrong place. And the AI is going to pick up on that. But most importantly, the AI will also pick up on the fix. Gotcha. So if it gets fixed, the AI will automatically close down that error or close down that loose end. So those loose ends, that pre-punch, that's like such a pain for everybody to be able to track, and like the return visits that it causes to get people to come back and have to fix those things. It's like, it takes just as long to get the last 5% of any scope work done as it did to get the first 95. And so being able to track those loose ends all the way along, right, and prevent those return visits is like, again, bringing efficiency to the entire conversation and really changing the way that we interact with the trades.
Let me ask you another very particular question, because we have this argument constantly. What is extra work and what is not, according to the scope? Would that be helpful?
Oh, my God.
Would that be helpful in determining what's extra work and what is not? Because we have those fights on projects when they're ongoing, afterwards, all of the time.
Yeah. And in the contract where it's like, by others.
Yeah.
Who others?
Or I disagree with this in my scope. And we continually have those fights. So I'm just curious if it has
That's exactly right. I mean, it's interesting. Like, we upload schedule of values into our system, so we know exactly who is responsible for every single part of the work, right? I know in the system knows XYZ contractor is responsible for this scope and Z contractor is responsible for this scope. So it's going to track them very specifically based on the scope of work and where they're working. And it will very clearly call out who's doing what they're supposed to do and who's not.
Gotcha. Very interesting. So how many percentage of jobs are using this? Is it being well accepted? Because I know like contractors in general are just kind of angst with AI and technology in general.
They're justifiably angst with technology in general, because I've said this several times, and, contractors are like, yes, what happened is that construction was like the last industry to be touched by technology. Right. And it's like all people of technology, whether you had ever been in construction or not, was like, ooh, an industry that hadn't been touched. And so all of a sudden, everybody just swooped in on construction. And these poor guys who have just been doing the same thing the same way, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, are like, who the hell are you to tell me that I'm doing something wrong or that I could be doing it a better way? Because I know what I do and it's all in my brain. And, you know,
we don't need contracts. We don't need, you know.
We don't, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I think adoption has been slow. And I think primarily because technology is still a nice to have. It's not a need to have.
Okay.
And what those of us in the technology space, and especially people with construction backgrounds like myself, we're really trying to turn that conversation into, there are not enough people to build what society needs today.
Absolutely.
So how are we, the industry, answering that other than saying, get in line? Sorry. Or like hiring, right. Or like hiring people that don't know what the hell they're doing. And, you know, how do we overcome that? And the fact that we have a huge recruiting and retaining problem because nobody wants to be working 12 to 14-hour days in a metal tube anymore. Like those days are over. So the use of technology is very quickly becoming a necessity and not a nicety, but convincing the industry of that is taking a long time. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, I show people our system and they're like, this is amazing. What's the catch? And I'm like, it's not cheap. It's not cheap.
Yeah.
You know? And so teaching the ROI, explaining ROI, and proving the negative is a real challenge to the construction industry, who are natural skeptics. We are skeptics by nature. And we are professional negotiators. So like every single thing is a negotiation. How cheap can I get it? And technology doesn't understand that. Technology is like, what are you talking about? This is the number. Why are you trying to beat me down on price? And the industry is like, this is what we do. And so, you know, because of that, it's been, to answer your original question, I think it's just been a slow adoption, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
So what is the ROI? Like, what does something like that look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think every product is going to have a different ROI to it, right? I mean, I think for a long time, the technology industry spent time trying to prove that we were saving people time. Mm-hmm. And like, well, if you're not walking around and marking things down, what's the price of that person, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you're not having to sit there and prove pay apps, what's the price of that person? But the numbers don't jive. To be clear, the numbers don't jive. And so unless you're doing something meaningful with the data, then I don't know that it makes a lot of sense, to be honest. And, you know, even Buildots, it was hard to sell at first because we were trying to figure out what that ROI was. Because I tell people all the time, sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, of like proving the negative. I can't prove you're going to have schedule delays, but you know you're going to have them. Mm-hmm. And I can't prove that you're going to have quality issues, but you know you're going to have them. And whether you want to admit it or not, I have one particular customer who's like, our projects are perfect. I'm like, let me just show you
all of shit that everybody else is, I'm sure.
Right. Let me just show you the 10 projects that's not the case on. Well, so, you know, what Buildots has recently rolled out is this delay forecast thing where really what we're able to show is, like I was telling you, smoke before there's fire. I can sit there and based on pace analysis and productivity rates, I can tell you where a trade is going to be delayed way before you can see that they're going to be delayed. And I can show you where you think you should be focusing on this one trade because they're so far behind. But in reality, they have a plan to get back on track. And this other trade who looks like they're in good shape is actually totally screwed because they're falling behind. But you can't even see that they're falling behind yet based on the schedule. But the AI can. The data will set you free. It's going on my headstone. The data will set you free. The data tells you a lot of information. And if you, as the industry, if we're willing to trust the data and behave differently based on what the data tells us, then that's where the ROI is going to happen because it's going to save huge GCs. What our customers are seeing is like a 50% reduction in delays.
Really?
A 50% reduction in delays. I mean, that's real time. That's real money.
I agree.
But you have to be willing to think differently and go against your gut instinct.
So, like, tell me about your most successful client.
I would say, you know, it's interesting how our most successful clients work. I mean, there's some in Europe that are all in. I was just in London last week, spending time with some of our customers, and they are like, I'll never do another project again. This company will never operate again without Buildots because they've seen such amazing results, right? And these hospitals that are, we had a hospital that finished 3 months early.
Wow.
3 months early. That never happens, right? And so, and here in North America, we're still getting our groove. We're still getting our customer base, up to get great success stories. But I would say, Juno Construction out of Atlanta, they are this really innovative company. And I think they're so forward thinking, and I just love working with them. But their superintendents are young, they're hungry, and they just eat this data up. I mean, every week when that data comes in, they are like, what, give me more, because, they're like, where has this been my whole life, basically. But you gotta have partners, you gotta have people who are willing to trust it.
Do you see like a way to use this or a different AI for a smaller, like a residential builder?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I had a conversation last week actually with a residential builder. They do really high-end residential and do like 16, builds at a time, like a neighborhood. I absolutely see where it would be of benefit. The problem with residential contractors is they very rarely model. And you have to have a model in order to compare things to. Gotcha. And especially in America, we don't model residential. We'll model high-rise residential, but not single-family homes.
Gotcha. Interesting. So do you think companies in commercial construction will fall behind if they don't start using AI?
I think the customers are going to start expecting it. I think more and more the customers are expecting more transparency out of their contractors. That's been something that, it's funny, when I first came into the industry and they were showing me this, and they were like, there's so much collaboration between the customer and the contractor and the art designer. And I'm like, yeah, but contractors make money in the gray zone. We make money in the gray. And to open that wide up changes the whole business model, really. But customers, now that they know that this exists, are expecting to see it. And I tell my GC customers all the time, use this as a sales tactic. Use this when you're selling to say, we are the collaborative contractor. We are using this new technology. We are ahead of the times. We are opening this up and we're going to work together. And we're going to be looking at the same data all the time. You can rest assured we're never pulling the wool over your eyes because you can see the same data we can.
I was going to say, the owner's got access to everything.
Well, and it's up to contractors. I mean, we have some contractors who are like, don't you dare tell my customer that I'm using this. And we have some that are like, I want my owner to see it. I want my major trades to see it. And everybody's working in the system together.
I think that would be helpful because I don't think the way it's set up that they work very well together right now. And I think there's always a lot of communication and nobody knows what's going on until it's too late.
That's exactly right. And it's set up that way. We have set our business up that way to be secretive, to work in the gray zone and to try to just catch each other at every turn, right? Like, yes. We're just, this podcast is quit getting screwed. It's like, how do we as the industry stop screwing ourselves? Like, what can we do to do that? And I think technology and AI is absolutely the way to get there.
Do you think AI will eventually replace a lot of people?
No, it's interesting. Like, I was watching 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago, and it had one of like the, inventors of AI basically on there. And they were very clearly saying like, yes, AI is going to replace people. What I like to say, particularly in this industry, much like I said before, we don't have enough people to build what society needs. We do not. So what are we going to do to answer the question to society, to support society's growth? And my answer to that is, let's use people smarter. Let's reallocate people to do more. To do more with less people is what we as an industry need to do because we're so inefficient. And so that to me is where AI is going to help. It's, you are starting to see robots doing bricklaying, and there's going to be some of that happens where technology is going to come into play and it's going to start replacing some of these manual repetitive tasks. but I still maintain it's more about efficiency. How do we do more with less?
I agree. It sounds like it can streamline everything.
It really can. It's such a fascinating thing. And it's frustrating to me now being on this side of it that people are so resistant to it, just because I think we are, as an industry, as contractors, we are change resistant.
That's why technology was here last. They didn't want to fight with us.
That's exactly right. It's so right. And we think so highly of ourselves that we know better than everybody, right? And so the idea of using a machine to make decisions for us is a scary thought in some sense, but it's here.
It's here. It works. It's kind of like a control thing, right? I know this works. I'm not so sure if that works. I'm really scared. I mean, you're talking about, millions of dollars on the line, and if it doesn't work out. So
no, that's exactly right. And I think it's really funny when I see people's minds switch and it turns like that, right? They'll start a conversation with like, I'm just here because somebody forced me to have this conversation. And, it's these crusty superintendents that are just, pissed about being there. Uh-huh. And then by the end of the conversation, not only are they all into what I'm showing them, they're asking me if it can do more. Like, well, could it do this? And could it do this? I'm like, okay, slow your roll. I love that you've gone from like computers are the devil to like computers are going to do my whole job and I can't wait for it.
I can't do anything. I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. But the light bulb is starting to go off for people. And to me, that's the most exciting thing, to watch our industry really start to embrace it and really start to understand the magnitude of what's happening. But it does, I was at a conference a couple months ago. It was the Canadian Contractors Association, and they had this really inspiring keynote speaker, which, like, when are keynote speakers ever inspiring? They're horrible. But this guy was like this former rocker, right? He was this former musician from a band called Moist in Canada, and all the Canadians were like eating it up. But he's turned into doing AI. And so his whole speech was like, look, AI is here. If you're not getting on the bandwagon now, you're going to get left behind. And you're going to be in the minority of people who are benefiting from what technology is bringing you. And he made this metaphor, and he had this image up of this, very construction, old white man looking guy standing on the side of a plane, and he's trying to jump out of the plane and he's screaming, right? He's like, ah! Like you would do if you're jumping off a plane and you're freaking out. But he made this metaphor of, yes, this is what AI feels like today. This is what technology feels like today. But if you just go ahead and make the jump, just jump out of the plane, give it a try. And then he was like, peace, right? And then it's like, everybody's like holding hands in the air and it's peaceful and, and nobody's screaming anymore. And you're like, oh, okay, that's not that bad. It's not that bad, So like, just jump out of the plane. And I tell people all the time, like, I know today it feels like I'm asking you to jump out of a plane, but take the leap, take the first step, and try it.
Yeah, awesome. So tell me where people can find out more about your company and what it does.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, reach out to me. I'm so accessible. I love to talk to people about this. As you can tell, I'm super passionate about it. You can find us at buildots.ai. It's BUILDOTS. It's like build dots, like connecting the dots, building dots, but 2 Ds would look stupid, so we're just build dots.
Gotcha.
So it's builddots.com. And you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Jessica Herrala. Anybody on my team you can reach out to. I'm just so excited to bring this to the market and to bring it. And it doesn't have to be a huge contractor, you guys. You don't have to be a Turner or a Skanska to do this, to afford this, to be into the technology and AI revolution. Anybody can jump in here and do this. And so learn more.
What do you think about subs using it, even if they're GCs?
Oh my gosh, the MEP trades are starting to reach out, and they're like, okay, this makes a lot of sense for me. Even if I'm the only one that uses it, even if the trade's the only one that uses it and the GC is not, I mean, talk about data.
Yeah.
Talk about being able to like
Come back
prove to the GC.
40% of this scope of work. Here you go.
That's exactly right. Talk about it for those major trades. So yeah, absolutely. I love to talk to trades, these complex MEP projects in particular that keep you up at night. These projects that you're like, those ones that you win and you're like, oh God,
I can't believe I won that job. Yeah.
What did I just do?
Yeah, those.
Those projects, like, don't put us on the easy ones. Put us on the complicated ones. Put us on the ones that keep you up at night and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to barf thinking about it.
Awesome.
Because, you can see it from all over.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I really appreciate it.